Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Women in the Military podcast. I'm excited to partner with Team Rubicon and have Carol as my guest to learn more about not only her military story, but also about what Team Rubicon does. So, welcome to the show, Carol. I'm so excited to
Hi,
have you here.
it is my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, I always like to start with why did you decide to join the military? So, you could start there.
Sure. You can say I had an adventurous youth and ended up meeting an amazing police officer who really inspired me. And so I decided that I wanted to follow in his footsteps because what I watched him do was real, right? He was making a real difference in people's lives. So you have to be 21 to be a sworn police officer, and college wasn't in the picture back in 19. And so I decided I was going to enlist in the Army as an MP to get the military experience and the police experience while I waited to turn 21.
That sounds awesome. And so I didn't quite hear what time of the year it was. I feel
Well,
like
I was successful at it, right?
yeah, you were very successful. But what was the military like when you joined the military? Were there any conflicts going on, or was it in between? What
So
what was?
all right, so to unmuffle the year I enlisted, it was 1976. And at that point in time when I enlisted, the Women's Army Corps was still active. And so I was actually a WAC when I enlisted. So um, that was post Vietnam and the Cold War era. So no active conflicts at that point in time.
But what was it like to be part of the WAC? Because I've talked to a few women, but not a lot about what it's like to be, before the military was like all integrated. It, what was that like?
So it was an interesting time because they were just starting the integration when I was in. There were very few MP slots for women, so I had to wait for one to come open. Um, um, at first, I had to wear you're familiar with Class A's, right? But my Class A uniform was a jacket and a skirt, and I wore my weapon belt around my jacket, wearing my skirt and low quarters. And women at that point carried a 38 instead of the Colt 1911 45 because that was too big and heavy for us. So, um, yeah, it was interesting. But I was the last, I was in the last basic training unit at Fort Jackson to go through WAC basic training. They started the integrated basic training after that. So
Wow. Yeah, so you were kind of in the transition phase. You like went through the training, but then everything was changing. And it was I don't know why I didn't even recognize obviously MPs not a very high military. I mean, there weren't a lot of women anyways, but MPs would have been even more uncommon. So, what was that experience like to be an MP?
uh, so my first real duty station was overseas in Germany, and we had two or three females in the company there, but I was the only female NCO in the battalion at one point. Um, it's like, and I'm sure this is still the same because you're still um, a female in a traditionally male environment, and so you work to find that balance of being uh, who you are and who you need to be professionally, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, irritate some people, or you can go too far and trying to be one of the guys. What you have to find is a way to be your authentic self and be professional and do your job. So,
Yeah, I can really relate to that. When I deployed with an infantry unit, and
oh boy,
so even though, like, the role I was doing as a civil engineer, I mean, that's still kind of more male dominated, but
yeah,
it was interesting to, like, have to find that balance of, like, how
yeah,
you do your job and be professional, and also, yeah, you can't just be one of the guys. It is like it's, like, hard to put in words. Now I'm, like,
it
trying to
is.
speak it, and I'm like, "I know what you're saying, but I can't find the right words." So, like, I totally understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It
So,
is. It is hard to describe.
yeah. Which I think is, like, one of the reasons that when you're around veterans, especially women veterans, you can say things and they can just be like, "I got you," without having to, like, tell the whole story because you can understand it together. So,
Yes,
yeah.
totally. And
So,
it's funny in that I'm seeing that even a generation or two later, it's still the same as it
yeah.
was. Hopefully, it's a little bit better than it was in 1976, but there are still
Yes.
feel like there's still the baseline that's still kind of there that you have to walk along.
Yeah. I think there are things that have gotten better, especially since I've gotten out of the military. I've seen a lot of changes happen, and but I still think it's hard to be a minority in any situation, especially being a female in a male-dominated career field. That just is a challenge that is universal throughout the years. Even as things get better, there's still things that are hard. So,
One of my daughters enlisted in 2008, I think it was. We sat down and had a long preparatory talk and lots of chats along the way.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. You gotta prepare and make sure that they're aware of everything that could or could not happen and just the things that you need to be prepared for. So, you said that you joined in the late 70s, and then how long did you serve in the military?
6 years.
Okay. And then by that time, were you 21 and so then you could go and be a police officer?
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly what I did.
Look, I got it all figured
Well,
out.
actually I was more than 21. My first enlistment took me to 21, but I was stationed in Germany and loved the unit I was in and loved the area that I was in and I loved my job. And so, yeah, let's do another. Let's do another tour. So I
So you
stayed.
ended up staying more than one tour.
Yeah,
Okay. And were you in Germany the whole time, the whole 6 years?
yeah. I spent a year as permanent party at the MP unit at Fort Jackson, and then spent the rest
Okay.
of the time in Germany.
Awesome. Yeah. So, when you transitioned out of the military, what was that experience like?
Um, it was multifaceted. Um, like I said, I really enjoyed my time in. I enjoyed the discipline, the structure. Like I said, I loved my job. um, but transitioning out, I think, was a little easier in that I went straight into civilian law enforcement. So um, I wasn't set completely free, if you will. There was still that structure and the uniform. Um, what was funny, I remember the first time that they talked about if you worked more than 8 hours, you had to put in for overtime. And it's like, wait, what? What? Uh, I'm used to working 12 to 14-hour shifts, so the idea of overtime was pretty hilarious to me. Um, the Yeah, if I think what I would have missed first, if I hadn't gone into civilian law enforcement, is probably that camaraderie and that connection that you get when you're in a position to where you're trusting your life to the guy or gal next to you, and vice versa. Because that's such a different bond than you get if you're a bank teller. So I think that staying in that field made that transition a little easier when I got out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you kind of went from the military police to civilian, so there were differences like over time, but
Yeah,
then a lot of similarities. And
right.
I mean, when people talk about leaving the military, especially if they like switch career fields or they don't work after, then they lose like that part too. But it sounds like there was also a little bit of like mixed emotions where
Sure.
it was good in the like that it prepared you well for the career you were going to do, but on the emotional side, were there any challenges?
Um, sure. Like I said, I had gotten married my second tour. Sorry, my first tour, and again, back in the day, if you were both in and you became pregnant, you had no option. You had to get out. So that's the position I was in. I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, so I didn't really have a choice. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
so I was a little
And
sad because yeah, I really enjoyed. Like I said, I loved being in the army. I loved being a soldier. I loved being an MP. But there were also some rumblings. How rumor control is when in the military, right? That they were going to change the MP Corps and make the garrison duty a civilian job, and then take the field duties that we had and make them a light infantry unit, which in 1982 still would have made me uh, reclassified for the good of the army. And
right.
we know how wonderful that probably would have been, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, I see some of the writing on the wall, and we're ready to start a family. So
Yeah.
there we go.
I actually before I started the podcast, I didn't know the history that women had to get out of the military when they were pregnant. Um, and it was really fascinating because the first person who told me, I was like, "What were you discriminated about against because you're a woman?" And she said, "No. Why'd you get out of the military? Because I got pregnant and I had to get out." And I was like, "I feel like there's a disconnect here." And so it was kind of interesting that she was just like, "No, that's just the way it was." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
um
We've come a
it's
long way.
good. That's one of those changes that has happened, and now women can stay in and they get maternity leave, and there's, benefits to helping, support military families, especially dual military couples, so, yeah, there has been a lot of changes, but I know that becoming a mom, because I left the military shortly after my son was born by my own choice, but it was really hard to make that transition,
Yeah,
out of with all the emotions of
sure.
becoming a mom and, the emotions of leaving the military, and I didn't realize they were all tied together
Yeah.
in some way, and so that makes a lot of sense. So, yeah. So, we're gonna talk about Team Rubicon. How did
Mm.
you get from where we are in your story to Team Rubicon?
So I decided to go back to college in 2011, and I was, still in law enforcement at the time, and I had been involved in one or two disasters, and this is going to sound odd, but I enjoyed being able to be of service, right, in that type of environment. But to respond to a disaster, you need to be affiliated with a recognized organization. Um, you don't want to be what they call a spontaneous volunteer and just walk up and say, "Hi, I'm here to help." Um, so um, we had a really active student veteran association where I was at the junior college I was going to, and we had talked about that. One of the guys one day said, "Hey, have you heard about this new organization called Team Rubicon?" I went, "No," and he said, "Well, it sounds like they're right up your alley. You should probably look them up." So I did, and I said, "You're right, they are." And I signed up, and I went to my first disaster response with them on Leap Day of 2012. So, and the rest is history. I've been with them ever
Wow.
since.
So can you tell us a little bit more? I'm not I've heard the name a lot, but I didn't know until I started talking to them what they actually did. So, for my listeners, can you tell us a little bit about the mission and the purpose of Team Rubicon?
So, one of our original tagline was "Bridge the Gap," and that was kind of a dual purpose tagline. It was to bridge the gap for a lot of the veterans who were coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq at the time. And at the time, there also was no were called NGOs, non-governmental organizations, or nonprofits who would respond um, immediately after the disaster to help people get back into their houses, like tarping roofs, boarding windows, a lot of chainsaw work to remove trees. So there wasn't anybody in that space, so we bridged that gap as well. Um, so um, that was how we started. Um, the genesis of the organization was actually 2010 when our co-founder Jake Wood had gotten out of the Marine Corps and um, whatever. And the earthquake in Haiti happened, and what was being covered in the news sources were that none of the big disaster responders or nonprofits would go because Haiti is such a wild and woolly place. And his thought was, well, hell, I'm a Marine, I'll go. And because I mean, it was a horrible, 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 uh, horrible earthquake. I mean, tens of thousands of people were dead and injured. So um, he called a couple of his friends, and one of his friends also knew a Jesuit priest who had connections in Haiti, and so they got their little band of brothers together and um, got themselves to the country on the other side of Haiti. I'm terrible in geography, and I've told this story so many times. But they went in through the back way, and as they crossed the river into Haiti, um, Brother Jim turned and looked at him and said, "Okay, boy, this is our Rubicon. In other words, this is we cross here, and we're beyond the point of no return." And then they proceeded to spend several days in Haiti. They all had combat lifesaver skills, and and so Jake realized that combat veterans are actually very well suited for disaster zones because of the chaos, right? Uh, and the destruction, and so it's like he had the idea that what this can work. This can work on several different levels, right? Because there's nobody in the disaster response area right now that does this kind of work, um, and this could help with the transition from military to civilian
Yeah.
because it's an environment in which they're used to operating.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense of thinking about like all the training I did to go to Afghanistan and how that could correlate really easy to a different location and especially disaster response because you're trained, yeah, the combat medic, combat lifesaver, all those different things. Even a 9-line medevac is
Yeah.
like
Yep.
knowing what you need to know to help get a person out of a situation. And so that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and the ability to keep your head right. Like I said,
Yes.
making sense of the chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, being able to make a decision, being able to keep moving forward, all those things that the military teaches you. Yeah. That makes
And
a lot of sense.
one of my favorite parts of the story, and one of my favorite parts of Team Rubicon is so while they were in Haiti, Brother Jim, you know, kept an eye on the guys and realized that dealing with a lot of feelings, right? Because of the destruction and the death and the just the horrible conditions. And so, being the good Catholic boy that he was, he found a local kid, gave him some money, and said, you know, go find us a couple 6 packs of beer. And so the kid did, and that night they started what is still a tradition to this day in Team Rubicon, and that's the evening campfire. And the whole idea was to have a beer, maybe two, um, to relax and get to the point where you can decompress and not bottle all that up, right? And so we still do that to this day with our volunteers. You know, it's a maximum of two. There's nothing untowards, but as if you do this enough, you can start dealing with secondary trauma. And so that's not something we want to let our volunteers bottle up or compartmentalize too much. So, so yeah, that's the story of uh, of the birth of Team Rubicon.
Yeah. I love hearing that story and learning a little bit about it. And I love you know, the campfire idea of because that's goes against, like, everything that the military kinda it's like stuff it down and get through the mission and, like, don't talk about it, which is how, you get through it, but then at the end, when you're in a safe place, it's the end of the day, you need that time to decompress and talk about it and, just find what you need to find to be able to move forward.
Yeah.
So how does Team Rubicon help veterans retool their military skills for civilian disasters? We kind of like touched on it a little bit, but do you have anything you want to add?
So we've got several different things in place. So for uh, for example, for our sawyers, we have a very structured chainsaw uh, progression of courses, damage assessments. We also use heavy equipment, and we have that training and certification as well. We use the ICS, which is the Incident Command System, which is a FEMA endorsed thing, and so we offer ICS classes. Um, and I think the biggest thing is, and we talk about this a lot, is when you get out, um, finding your new identity and your new purpose and a new community, right? One of the things, so when I had heard about Team Rubicon in 2011, I did some snooping and Dr. Google said, and I ran across the TED presentation that Jake did, and in there, the one thing that he talked about that really hit me was um, when he left Afghanistan. He on on Wednesday he was a sergeant in charge of a sniper squad, making life and death decisions for a team, and then he had a flight home. And then Friday, the most important decision he had to make was what breakfast cereal to have in the morning, right? So there was such a disparity, and so I think one of the things that one of the many things that we provide for veterans is again that sense of purpose, right? Because we're all about the mission, which is helping the survivors of natural disasters and crises. The community, um, I think regardless of what generation military that you are, if you're a vet, you're a vet, right? And
Mhm.
there is a sense of, let's say, a safe environment, right? You don't have to explain a lot of stuff, um, and that identity is still there. Because once you're a vet, you'll be a vet for the rest of your life, and you've got that connection and that commonness with, I don't care what your branch is, I don't care what generation you are, I don't care if you're a combat vet or not, you're still a vet. And I
Mhm.
think I think that's grounding for a lot of people. So um,
Do you think that's part of why Team Rubicon is able to build such a tight-knit
yeah,
community so quickly? Because that's, like, your foundation that you're basing off of?
yeah, and it's part of that too is you know shared experiences, shared hardship. When we deploy, we're not staying in hotels. We we sleep in and stay in a lot of times gyms, school gyms. Uh, Churches will help us out. We stayed in uh, VFWs. We've slept in FEMA trailers. We've eaten MREs. I had to stop. In my day, they were sea rats. Um, so that shared hardship, that shared experience, that uh, mission first mentality is what builds that. Same thing with like first responders, police officers, fire, and rely on your buddies, right? That's what helps build that.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a great organization, a great way for veterans to find that you're talking about the identity and the purpose. One of the things that I've heard about is this thing called the gray shirts. Can you tell me like what that is and what it was like
Sure.
for you the first time you got to wear it?
Sure. So part of the story of the genesis, right, of when the team went to Haiti was they thought they should probably try and find something, some kind of a same T-shirt to wear, so they could at least be identified as a group. But the only thing that they could find was a bunch of gray Under Armour T-shirts. So our shirts now, and I apologize for not having one on. Um, they are gray and they have Team Rubicon across the front, and then there is a white space, like a rectangle, and that's where we write our names in. So, and everybody, just like the Marine Corps, where every Marine's a rifleman, in Team Rubicon, everybody is a gray shirt. There's that
Oh,
same
okay.
commonality. So,
Yeah, so it's like part of your uniform and part of that community aspect of being part of a team and being part of, you know, the experience, no matter what role you play. Everyone is important. Yeah.
exactly.
And speaking of, like, what role you play, not everybody who's involved in your organization has to deploy, right?
That
Is
is,
there opportunity Yeah, okay.
yeah,
So what opportunities are there for people who don't deploy?
so we've got all sorts of things. We have what we call blue sky operations and gray sky operations. Um, Gray skies being the deployment to the actual disaster area. Blue skies are the non-deploying and non-active disaster operations that builds the framework that lets us deploy. And so things like volunteers can help with planning and logistics, data entry and mapping, volunteer coordination and communications. That's huge. Fundraising, Team Rubicon is 100% donor funded. We take nothing from the government, and so helping fundraise, finding corporate sponsors, corporate partners, sharing our social media posts. There's all sorts of non-deployed activities for somebody to become involved with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just like in the military, there's people on the front lines and there's people
Right.
back, you
I
know,
think
you have
I think the numbers, if I remember right, it takes like 19 people to support one infantryman. Once count all the logistics and the cooks
Mhm.
and the everything. So yeah,
Yeah, for
lots of
sure.
work.
getting paid, all those
Yeah,
things.
the important things, right?
Yes, I
Um,
remember those were so important when we were overseas to get that support, the back end support, you needed that a lot, so
and one thing that I really like about and appreciate about Team Rubicon is that it doesn't cost a volunteer anything to volunteer with us. We provide the transportation to and from, and we feed you and we put you up. Now, granted, it's on a cot in a gym with 50 of your
right.
best friends, but uh, it doesn't cost. It shouldn't cost a volunteer anything to come out and help with us.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know I've worked with organizations before, and I know it's hard to, like, get the finances, so sometimes they have to have you pitch in as the volunteer to, like, get you there,
Yeah.
but that's a really great thing, that you guys prioritize that. So, has being part of Team Rubicon and working with them changed your perspective on your retirement?
What's retirement?
Leaving the military, I think
I don't
has
know
it
what
I
retirement
used
means.
the wrong word. Yeah. I used the wrong word, sorry, on
That's
leaving the
okay.
military.
Um, I you know I'm one of the people who are wired that what I do has to be real. Um, I tried a non-service job for about a year and was absolutely miserable. So, between the military and my time in law enforcement, and I worked for local municipalities after that. I was still um, doing good things, providing service for my community, and I think being in the military at the age of 18, I think it helped me recognize it about myself. Um, so I think that was a trigger
Yeah.
in
Do you
recognizing.
do you think if, you're talking to a veteran, pretend you're talking to a veteran, and they're saying they feel, like, out of place or out of practice and, like, they're lost, what would you recommend that they do?
Come on out, come on out. Um, you're in good company. Um, everybody's got a place in TR. I can tell you a story of one of we had a tornado response, and most of the guys that were there were combat vets, and one of the guys was newly returned and hadn't realized what a destructive and violent environment a post tornado area is, and it triggered a panic attack. And luckily, his team leader was also a combat vet and realized what was going on. And so we shut down the entire operation and went back to our fob, and we all just kind of sat and held space for him. And later on, interesting, he went on to get his master's degree and became a licensed counselor, and now runs a nonprofit PTSD program for vets and first responders. But he said that instance, he had never felt more supported and more comfortable. So uh, come on out.
Yeah. I mean, I love how it's the people first aspect and, like, of course, you're there to help people, but you're also there to take care of the veterans who are there
Echo.
and help them process what they need to process and do what you need to do, and so that's just a really cool story to hear about. Do you have any stories of, like, people that you've helped? Maybe it could be another story of, like, a veteran. I really like that story, but is there, like, a survivor or someone that you were able to help that stands out?
So I thought a lot about this, and I've been doing this. I did nothing but responses for 10 years and probably had close to 70 responses. Um, but the ones that have stuck with me aren't necessarily individuals, but I can give you two examples. One individual was one of my very first responses, and it was in rural Iowa, and it was an older couple, probably in their 70s, because he was a World War II vet, and a one of those huge 30-foot I beams from a horse barn a couple hundred yards away had been driven like at an angle through the length of their trailer home. This couple had ridden this storm out in their bathtub, and so also part of what we do that's cathartic for the survivors is we listen to their stories. Letting them tell their story is part of the beginning of the recovery from the disaster. And so I was talking to this couple as my partner was um, looking around at some of the damage, and he was poking around where this I beam had gone into the wall of this trailer. And as we're talking, I'm kind of watching him, thinking, okay, what are you into now? But he reached into the wall cavity alongside this I beam, and he pulls out this case and he dusts it off and he opens it up, and it's this veteran's Purple Heart from World War II. Yeah, I still get choked up when I tell the story. But he so that's my individual favorite. Um, I think that there are a couple of community ones. I was in Moore, Oklahoma, and wherever you have a large loss of life is always an impactful deployment. And I was in Alaska in the end of last year, and that's one that didn't get a lot of press down here in the lower 48. Um, but what happened there was a typhoon, and the western part of Alaska is very, very flat and is just barely above sea level. So that when this typhoon's storm surge came in, I mean, it went 60 miles inland. And they live, the native villages there live a subsistence lifestyle. So everything they consume, they kill, they catch, they grow, they harvest. And so they uh, gather all of this and have winter stores to make it through the winter. So when this storm came through, it wiped all that out. Not only that, but they lost their means of subsistence. Their weapons were gone, their fishing nets were gone, uh, all of that. And there were 1,500 people that were air vac. Um, that's it. That's all they had was whatever they had on. And so we had two teams in Alaska. We had a team out in Bethel, and they were doing what they could to get the remaining houses re-insulated before winter came in. And then we had a team in Anchorage that were resupplying the evacuees in Anchorage. And I mean, we're talking basics, right? I mean, absolutely incredible, and it was such a change in their lifestyle. Feeding, right? They don't eat what we would consider a typical American diet,
Right.
and that was hard on them. So being able to make even just a little of an impact on them and bring a little bit of positivity into their lives was absolutely amazing. So yeah, so those are probably the ones that come to mind most.
Yeah, I'm sure you have so many stories because just hearing those 2 is, like, gives you chills, and I live in California, so I remember when that happened only because there was, like, warnings that
Oh
there would
yeah,
be something.
Yeah.
farther south, but I never heard anything about what happened in Alaska. When you mentioned that, I was like, "Oh, I remember because we were worried about that all along the West Coast."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's really that's something like people don't hear about, and you guys were there responding and helping, and that's really cool that you guys are doing what you're doing. So, I think I only have a few more questions, but I guess one thing that would be really to help veterans as they transition is what is a simple habit that helps you maintain your sense of purpose every day?
Ooh, that's a good question. Controlling my ADD. Um, I think I think getting up and having something to look forward to, knowing that what I'm doing is still real and has the ability to make a real impact. It's Mahatma Gandhi's phrase of losing yourself in the service to others. So
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, I'm planning to go back to school in the fall, and I'm kind of like in the middle of trying to figure out what's next, and I feel that like
what you want to be
loss.
when you grow up,
Yeah,
I
that
totally
loss of
figure that.
like where am I and where am I going? And so yeah, I totally understand that. So,
So when are you going
but
to sign up for Team Rubicon?
I don't know. I have to do more research because it sounds really interesting. And it sounds like a great organization. So
It
I'll have
is,
to I'll have to look into it.
and we have a great comms team.
Yeah.
So
Oh, perfect.
there you
That's
go.
where I'd like to be. So yeah. Yeah, I like the non-deploying aspect because with young kids and my husband's still in the military,
Yeah,
deploying is not something that I want to do right now. But like you said, there's all those people that are in the support roles. So
right. And you'd be gaining another support family. We have,
yeah,
we have several spouses that are part of our team. So
it's awesome.
just saying.
So for giving me recommendations of what to do, where would I go to get more information?
You can go to our website, which is www.teamrubiconusa.org.
Awesome. We'll put that in the notes so that people can find it easily, um, and then you can go to their website and get all the information that you need. And I always like to end the interview with advice for the next generation. So, what advice would you give to a young woman who's considering joining the military?
Let's see. Um, Work out before you get to basic, right? Cardio,
Hmm.
weights, um, prepare, understand that a lot of basic training is a mind game. And I'm sure you could agree with that. And know that and go into it with the mindset that you're going to make it through. The other thing I would highly recommend is researching uh, what you want your job in the military to be, and think the long game when you do that. Because whether you do a 3 year, a 4 year, a 20 year, and retire, even if you do that, you're still young enough to have another career. And so try to pick a field um, that you can make that second career out of. So,
I think that's great advice. I wrote a book for girls who are considering joining the military, and everything you said was stuff that I said. So, check, check, check. Yes, especially the career thing, because a lot of people think,
yeah,
"Oh, that sounds really cool," and then you don't think about like, can I do this as a
yeah,
civilian? Will I want to do this, or is the way I can transfer those skills into another job? Because you
right.
don't always have to do the same thing. But yeah, that's really great advice.
Yeah.
So
Not a lot of roles for a tank driver in the civilian world.
for sure.
I also have a correction to make. I was wrong on the website is .com, not .org. So it's
Okay.
www.teamrubiconusa.com.
Okay.
So,
I'll make sure that is correct in the show notes, and, thank you for that, and thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you for
Thanks.
sharing your story and
Thanks for
for
having me.
telling
It's
us.
been a pleasure.
Yeah. Yay, thank you.
Thanks.